You wake up 10,000 years ago. Once, years ago, you carried a deer over the ridge without setting it down. One time. You did it one time. The settlement has never stopped mentioning it. And somewhere in the retelling it stopped being a story about a good day and quietly became a description of what you are for. Now when something heavy has to go somewhere, nobody asks. They look at you, then at the thing, then back at you, and the silence does the asking. You would like that to stop. Everything that follows is because you would like that to stop. Here is the situation you're actually in. Every single thing in this world moves at the speed of somebody walking. Grain, stone, news, sickness, a warning, all of it travels at the pace of a person carrying it. And the pace does not improve if the thing is precious or urgent or if someone is dying at the far end. An ox is stronger than you and no faster. The world is exactly the size of how far a person can walk in a day. It has never been any other size, and nobody has ever thought to be insulted by that. So you go looking for something that pushes without being alive. You already own one. It's on the fire right now. A lidded pot at a boil lifts its own lid. Everyone has seen this. Everyone has pushed the lid back down with a stick and thought absolutely nothing about it. Because a lid moving is not interesting. What's interesting is that it moved, and you didn't move it, and neither did an animal, and neither did the wind. Something under there is pushing, and it will keep pushing all afternoon for as long as the fire is lit. So you put a stone on the lid. It lifts the stone. You put a heavier stone on, and it lifts that too, only slower. And standing over a cooking pot with a rock in your hand, you have just measured something nobody has ever measured. Catching it is the hard part. Steam that isn't held doesn't do anything, it just leaves. A skin stretched over the pot swells, bursts, and scalds your forearm badly enough that you work at arm's length for a season. Sealed clay weeps for a while, and then comes apart in a way that puts a piece of itself in the roof. Bronze is worse, which nobody expects, because bronze is the good stuff, and the settlement is proud of it. Bronze goes soft while it's still holding. It doesn't break. It sags, and then it opens. You need a vessel that can hold a fire's worth of push and not give up, which sends you backwards into a completely different problem you had no intention of solving. The rock you want is common, dull, and refuses to melt. A wood fire won't touch it. Wood burns dirty and stops short. And stopping short is the entire history of everyone's first attempt at this. Charcoal burns hotter, and charcoal with air driven through it hotter still. So the real invention here is a bag that breathes. You squeeze, the fire goes white, and everyone watching understands at once that the bag is doing something the fire could not do alone. Even then, you never get liquid iron. You get a glowing sponge full of grit, and the only way to part them is violence, heat, hammer, fold, heat again, until what's left is a bar. Then comes the rule that governs everything after. A little charcoal in the metal makes it hard, slightly too much makes it brittle, and the difference between a tool and an expensive mistake is a quantity nobody can see. Turns out you're not the first to hold iron, only the first to make it. Some people have had it for centuries without smelting a thing because theirs fell out of the sky. A pharaoh is buried with a dagger of meteorite iron. It was a gift long before it was a decision. Now you have a vessel that holds and still no machine, because a machine needs the push to happen again, in one direction, forever. So, a piston in a tube. And the tube is never round. It leaks past the piston, no matter how you pack it with rope and tallow and wet leather, and everything that escapes is push you already paid for in charcoal. The fix isn't a better piston. It's a better hole. You drive the cutter down the inside of the tube from a fixed shaft, so the cut can't wander off wherever the metal happens to be soft, and what comes out is round in a way hands are simply not capable of. That machine is real, and it exists for another reason entirely. It was built to bore cannon barrels by John Wilkinson in 1774. The first practical steam cylinders in the world are bored on gun-making equipment. And the boast of the age is that a cylinder as wide as a man's shoulders came out true to about the thickness of a worn coin. The tolerance is the invention. Everything else in that machine already existed. What arrives in 1774 is a hole you can trust. And now the engine works, it is the size of a hut, and it will pump water out of the ground until the end of time. It cannot go anywhere. To move, it has to carry its own fire, its own water, and its own considerable self, and still have something left for cargo that isn't itself, which means asking the boiler to hold far more than it wanted to, which means the thing you stand beside has stopped being a curiosity. Then the ground beats you anyway. Wheels sink. A loaded wheel on soft earth digs its own hole, climbs out of it, and digs another one, forever. You widen the wheels. You lay stone. You lose a season to mud in a way that makes the deer feel like a kindness. You, being the genius you are, stop trying to fix the wheel. The wheel was never wrong. The ground is wrong, and you don't have to fix all of the ground. Only the two thin lines of it the wheels actually touch. Two hard strips, smooth and straight, going where you're going. On a proper surface, an animal hauls something like 10 times what it can drag across a field, and that one ratio is the argument that carries the next 200 years. Wooden strips splinter. Cast iron plates crack, because cast iron is superb at being squeezed and pitiful at being bent, and a loaded wheel bends it. The first steam locomotive to haul a real load runs in 1804, Richard Trevithick in Wales. 10 tons of iron and 5 wagons and 70 people who climbed aboard so they could say they had. It works, and it breaks the track, because the track was never built for anything that heavy. The engine wasn't the problem, the road was. It takes wrought iron, and then cheap steel after 1856, before the rails stopped being the weakest part of the railway. There's a wall in here that looks stupid now, and did not look stupid then. Everyone assumes a smooth wheel cannot grip a smooth rail, so the early answers are elaborate. A toothed rail with a cogged wheel biting into it, which worked and ran from 1812. An engine fitted with mechanical legs that shoved against the ground behind it like a man pushing a cart uphill, which ran in 1813 and was abandoned after its boiler let go and killed people who had come out to watch. Then somebody does the arithmetic on friction and finds that plain weight on plain wheels was always enough. Two of the hardest problems here were solved by measuring instead of building. Now it goes, and it will not stop. Stopping means a brake on every wagon, and a man riding each one to work it, so the train halts as fast as the slowest man aboard can hear a whistle and work out what it meant. Compressed air lets one person do it from the front. George Westinghouse, 1869, and 3 years later comes the version that matters. You, being the genius you are, build the brake backwards. The pressure doesn't apply the brakes. It holds them off. A cut hose, a burst pipe, a train that snaps in half. Anything that fails into stopping, and both halves break themselves without a person deciding anything. You have built a machine whose broken state is its safe state, which is not how nature works and not how anything else you own works either. Coupling stays barbaric far longer. A link and a pin, dropped by hand, by a man standing between two moving wagons, and the men who do that job are known by their hands. The coupler that closes itself on contact arrives in 1873, and needs another 20 years and a law before anyone has to use it. And then the last problem turns out not to be in the machine at all. Every village keeps its own noon. Noon is when the sun is highest here, which is a different moment one valley over. And this has never mattered to anybody in the history of the species because nobody could move fast enough for the difference to catch them. Now 2 trains are on one track, both perfectly on time, by 2 different times. A timetable cannot be written until everyone agrees what o'clock it is. And they don't agree. They are made to agree. By railways. Because railways are the only thing that cannot run without it. In North America, the clocks are surrendered on the 18th of November, 1883, the day of 2 noons, when a great many places lived the same hour twice on the way to sharing one. You set out to stop being asked to carry things. You have rewritten what now means for everyone alive. Now watch what people actually do with it. The chief's first act is to require that the line pass his hut. It does. It's a bad route, it costs a season and a cutting through good ground, and he almost never rides it. It simply has to be there. His second act is a carriage of his own, which he rides alone, and which is unbelievably boring. Traveling fast past people who aren't looking at you is not the feeling he was expecting. So he brings someone along to be impressed, and they are, for about 4 minutes, after which they are a person sitting in a box with the chief, and there is nowhere in the box to go. The carriers are finished. Every man here with a back and a reputation for it, including, for years, you, now has nothing anyone needs. They don't blame the engine, because an engine isn't the sort of thing you can blame. You are no longer looked at when something heavy needs moving, which is exactly what you wanted. And it turns out that being looked at differently is worse. Grack keeps the timetable. Nobody appointed him. He was the first person to write down when the thing leaves, and the list became the schedule, and the schedule became Grack. He is now the only man who can tell you whether you have missed it, and he tells you in a particular voice, which is the other thing you built without noticing. Before this, a person arrived when they arrived. There was no moment after which you were late. Lateness had to be invented, and it gets invented here, by a machine that leaves whether or not you are standing beside it. And inside a season, being late has stopped describing an event and started describing a man. Then the goods start arriving. Pots come in from 4 valleys away. They are not better than the pots made here. They are the same, at half the work, from a place with better clay. The potter here has not got worse. He has simply, for the first time in his life, been compared. He takes it about as well as you'd expect, and his position is that the pots from away are fine if you like that sort of thing. And he holds that position for the rest of his life. Fish arrives inland, still cold. Nobody here has eaten fish that wasn't dried, and half the settlement decides on the spot that they don't care for it, mostly because the other half made a lot of noise about it first. News gets on board too, and nobody thought about that at all. A man walks 2 days to the next settlement to explain his side of something, and finds they heard about it yesterday morning from a person who was not there. He is now arguing with a version of himself that arrived ahead of him and had the whole night to settle in. Before this, you could always outrun what was said about you simply by being the one with legs. That is quietly ended, and the first generation to grow up under it will never know it was ever otherwise. The chief, who has been waiting for his moment, taxes the line. The tax is on stopping. Anything that halts here pays for having halted, which is the first time in history anyone has been charged for something not happening. Grack collects it because Grack already has the schedule and therefore knows what stopped and when. And this is how a man who once carried a list becomes a man with 2 jobs and an opinion about both. Podrick's village gets a stop. Of course it does. They have started calling themselves a junction, which is not a word they had a month ago, and they use it the way other people use a title. Nothing about them improved. They are on the way to somewhere, and it turns out that's the only advantage that has ever really mattered. The settlement 1 Valley North doesn't get a stop. The line passes at a distance, close enough to hear at night. Nothing dramatic happens to them at all. People just leave, slowly, in the direction of the places that are easy to leave from. The ones who stay say they never wanted to stop. They say it a great deal. A man works out that he can ride to the end of the line and back to avoid a conversation, and does it so reliably that the conversation becomes permanent, and the avoiding becomes his entire personality. His wife always knows where he is. That's the part he hasn't thought through. The machine that lets him disappear runs on a schedule, so his disappearance is published. The engine hits an ox belonging to a man who had been warned about the ox. The hearing runs 2 full days, because there is no precedent anywhere for a thing that was in the right place at the wrong time, and it ends by inventing the concept of standing well back, which is then enforced ferociously by a boy who appointed himself to it, and who is, everyone agrees, insufferable and completely correct. The whistle takes over from the sun without anyone voting on it. People stop working when they hear it, start when they hear it, and put food on it the second one. And within a few years, nobody in the settlement can tell you where the sun is at any given moment, but everyone can tell you what the last whistle meant. A child born this season will grow up hearing it the way you grew up hearing birds, and will be genuinely startled, once, somewhere far from here, by how quiet a place can be. And in the end, the strangest thing it does is this. A man works here and has always lived here, because here is as far as a person can walk before and after a day's work. The train cuts that journey to a quarter of what it was. So he moves 1 valley out, then 2, to a bigger patch of ground he could never otherwise have had, until the journey is back up to half a day, precisely where it started. And now he does it twice daily, sitting down, watching the ground go past. He isn't being stupid. Every step of that made sense at the moment he took it. He was handed more time at once than any person in history had ever been handed, and he spent all of it immediately on being further away. Subscribe, and next time, walk. You won't, but next time.